So let's give a warm Wisconsin welcome for Governor J.B. Pritzker.
Thank you all so much. Hello, Wisconsin Democrats. So great to be here with all of you on Founders Day especially, and I want to thank Ben Wickler very much for the kind invitation to join you. Is this too loud? Can you hear me okay? Okay. I've come honestly to appreciate the phone calls that I get from Ben, who seems to be able to see around corners about the next great battles for the state of Wisconsin in your politics here. And of course, he never fails to make an impassioned plea for support for your state Democrats, and I'm always glad to help. Thank you, Ben, for your leadership. Look, I have friends in states all across the United States who are involved in politics, but nothing is like the politics of a good Midwestern state, where the winters are cold and the politics are hot, and where Democrats are doing the Lord's work in the pivotal hub of our nation's future. Wisconsin Democrats, you are the Ewok army of the political cinematic universe. You are a polite group of absolute assassins who bring down the entire Imperial shield generator by the end of the movie. I mean, you rid your state of Scott Walker. And you replaced him with a principal, an educator, a thoroughly good and decent man, Wisconsin's Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you elected Tammy Baldwin to the U.S. Senate, who, in addition to being history-making, is like a Jedi master, fighting for Wisconsin to get more affordable health care and to restore domestic manufacturing to your state. And you voted Emperor Palpatine, I mean Donald Trump, out. And you put Joe Biden in. At every turn, Wisconsin Democrats have proven that competence and compassion can beat chaos and cruelty. Of course, I'm an Illinois Democrat. We are your allies in all that you do, Wisconsin Democrats. We think of ourselves in Illinois as the sturdy center of the blue wall that all of us have been attempting to build across the Midwest. And shortly after you clear out the Galactic Empire's stormtroopers from their national convention here next year, we can't wait to host all of you at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. In case you didn't know, I'm a Democrat, and I always have been, which sometimes surprises people. Well, it shouldn't. My parents were both Democrats, and my mother was a progressive Democratic activist who was marching for civil rights and reproductive rights and gay rights in the 60s and the 70s. And when my father passed away in 1972, she took me with her to those rallies and those meetings and those protests. I was licking stamps and stuffing envelopes for progressive candidates at about the same time that I was learning to count. For the young people here in the audience today, let me be clear, there was no email or Instagram back then. The US mail was our version of social media. My mother first introduced me to Nancy Pelosi when I was 9 years old, and she has been my friend ever since. And when I was a kid, our neighbor was one of the leaders of the national LGBTQ community. When my mother passed away in 1982, Dianne Feinstein called and put out a statement honoring my mother. So I started working on Capitol Hill at age 18, and I ended up working for 2 US senators after college. Whether you want to call it nature or nurture, I was a full-fledged Democrat from day one. When I was elected governor of Illinois in 2018, along with Tony Evers, I went to work and I passed every single piece of legislation, progressive legislation, that I promised when I was campaigning. Every single one. Illinois became, you heard, the first Midwestern state to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. We enacted a nation-leading law to fight climate change and bring equity to the energy industry. We passed a massive infrastructure bill, by the way, that was 2 years before the federal government got around to it, that required everything be built by union tradespeople. We balanced our budgets and we funded education and social services and job training programs. We paid off all of Illinois' overdue bills left over from the Republican governor that I defeated. And we put an iron wall around women's rights with the passage of the Reproductive Health Act. And by doing so, we guaranteed that Illinois would become an oasis of reproductive freedom. And by the way, we banned assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, too. Now, as you heard, we legalized cannabis. Yep. And let me take this opportunity to thank all of you for your weed tourism. Don't legalize too quickly. In short, we did what Democrats do when we are in control of government. We made life healthier, more equitable, more livable, and freer for the people that we represent. Democrats are, by and large, a bunch of rational humans who think that workers should have collective bargaining rights, and that Fahrenheit 451 was not an instruction manual, but a cautionary tale. That laws protecting women's decisions about their health care should be based on science and not what Clarence Thomas read in the 1912 Farmer's Almanac. And that we all ought to make an honest attempt to stop the world from burning rather than play the game of, well, what character do you most resemble from The Last of Us? When Republicans are running things, on the other hand, it always feels like the 4th hour of Thanksgiving dinner when all your old angry uncles got together over Malort to yell about the dangers of rap music and that hippie that married your cousin. I mean, Republican Uncle Ron and Uncle Don can't handle the good Thanksgiving china without dropping. But now they want to take control of the nuclear arsenal and develop the health curriculum in your high school? Just look at the spectacle of the U.S. House of Representatives last week. The Republican leadership sold the entire soul of their party to a bunch of lunatics. Nancy Pelosi held the job for 8 years, passed major healthcare and economic legislation, never shut the government down, won over even her harshest caucus critics, and did everything possible to maintain the norms and decorum of a venerable American institution. Just look at the contrast. Now, you would think, after the embarrassing spectacle of McCarthy's defeat at the hands of his chucklehead caucus, Republicans would be focused on recapturing a shred of decency going into the election year. Instead, the interim Republican speaker permanently kicked Nancy Pelosi out of her office in the Capitol, which just proves that some men in leadership are just too emotional to hold the reins of leadership. Look, just about a year ago, Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked at home by a man who had embraced every single one of the Republican Party's greatest conspiracy hits. Pizzagate, Stop the Steal, JFK Jr. is coming back from the dead to lead the GOP to victory. How did the Republicans in Congress respond when Paul Pelosi almost lost his life to this man? They suggested the attack was staged and that the Pelosis deserved what they got. Ron DeSantis recently sicked his security on a 15-year-old New Hampshire kid who showed up at his events to ask him a few questions. I mean, now I understand DeSantis' education policies. He's just trying to keep high school kids from getting smart enough to ask him other tough questions at another town hall. Multiple GOP presidential candidates have suggested various things like welfare assistance is the worst thing in history, not slavery, that it's worse than slavery. Some free advice I'd like to offer to Republicans. It might be time to stop trying to find something that was worse than slavery, because there was nothing in our country's history that was worse than slavery. Just 2 weeks ago, Donald Trump claimed windmills are driving the whales a little batty and killing them in numbers that we have never seen before. Folks, 20 years ago, Howard Dean was driven out of the Democratic primary because he said the word "yeah" in a high pitch at the end of a speech. Today's GOP listens to Trump tilt at actual windmills, and Republicans are like, yeah, this is fine. There is no both sides in this debate. You can either vote for Democrats, or you can fling your body into a pitch-black chasm of insanity and vote for Republicans. Last week, the Washington Post ran a story, the title of which was "How Red State Politics Are Shaving Years Off American Lives." It showed that in states where Republicans control all the levers of government, people's life expectancies have dropped significantly. Why? Because GOP elected officials refuse to pass common sense legislation, like requiring seatbelts and imposing higher tobacco taxes. When Republican legislatures pass stricter and stricter abortion laws, states like Idaho are losing their maternal care doctors because everything they do is being criminalized. For many pregnant women there is no longer a doctor in Idaho that can help them. It's not hard to imagine a very near future where women in red states will have nowhere to safely deliver a child because all the OBGYNs have fled. It's becoming Gilead in The Handmaid's Tale. That's where we are in America today. That's the great partisan divide between a party that thinks we should do everything possible to help people be healthy and pursue happiness and live long lives, and a party hell-bent on killing you. Republicans are trying to fool people into believing that performative patriotism is the same as actual patriotism. They think that as long as you don't sit for the anthem, you don't have to stand for anything. They're convinced, and they're convincing themselves, that a history book in the hands of a child is dangerous, but a gun is not. They want to tell you that being woke is treason, but storming the U.S. Capitol on January 6th and killing a police officer was a legitimate protest. Real American patriotism is not just about revering symbols of democracy. It's about revering actual democracy. Patriotism embodies the best of Ted Lasso's many axioms. It's curious, not judgmental. Being a true American patriot means accepting every single day that there are people in this country who live their lives in ways that might completely baffle you. But your confusion, and at times your fear, does not grant you the right to control their choices. Real American patriotism means accepting the results of an election, not just when you win. And yes, we are looking at you, Wisconsin Republicans. What happened to telling the voters that you have campaign positions and you want to put them into practice? And you want to put them to a test in an election? And then being woman enough to deal with the results. What happened to that? Do the Wisconsin Republicans believe so little in the power of their own ideas and candidates that they now think that the only way that they can win is to cheat? Apparently so. If so, be honest about what you're about, Wisconsin Republicans. Don't try and couch what you're doing in the cloak of democracy while you're actually flirting with dictatorship. Janet Protasewicz won election to the Wisconsin Supreme Court fair and square. And she has done nothing to merit impeachment. She has done nothing to deserve having her good name besmirched by a small band of bitter men. Wisconsin GOP, you lost. You lost. Accept it. Move on. Make your case in the public square in the next election. Or move to a country more in line with the authoritarian tendencies that you seem to have embraced. Everything the Republican Party seems to stand for these days reflects a sharp rejection of the future. It's as if they woke up a few years ago from a half-century-old coma and have been standing amid a tide of societal progress, trying to hold back the flow. Show me a single policy of the modern-day GOP that embraces anything hopeful. Show me an example of where they've chosen to help rather than punish, to collaborate rather than create chaos, to be kind rather than cruel. Show me just one. I've thought a lot about why people care so much about age in this coming election, and I want to talk to you about it. We need to stop dismissing concerns about the physical age of a candidate, especially when the concern comes from a young person. Instead, what people are afraid of is the age of the candidate's ideas, not their physical age. There's an entire political party among the Republicans that are running to take every advancement away that we have made. And we have been working to make society more open and free. And they have been working against that. They idolize old, poisonous ways of thinking. Old, poisonous ways of thinking. This younger generation, they don't want to go back. They don't want to fight the old fights again. They want to take on the new, bolder fights. They want us to do better. They want us to take on fights that make us a better educated society, the fights that protect us from having to forfeit our bodily autonomy, the fights whose aim is to raise the standard of living for everyone. And Republicans know this. And this is where their ploy gets so cynical. They offer up the profiles of their bright young politicians, all while pushing policies that would put back into place our oldest original sins. Folks, Lauren Boebert is only 36. J.D. Vance is 39. Matt Gaetz is 41. We all agree that they may be young, but what they stand for is old and ugly. People grow older in one of two ways, and the stark difference between those ways is why some cultures revered their older members, and others put them on icebergs and let them float out to sea. Either they age driven by fear, fear of the new replacing the old, fear of people who don't think the way they do, in which case they become bitter and suspicious and at times hateful. Or they age into wisdom, gained from finding patience, learning from their mistakes, welcoming the grace that comes with empathy, embracing bravery when fear would be so much easier. Those who age like this develop a deep well of kindness toward the world around them. It's a type of kindness that is often impossible to find in your youth, but like a diamond, you need years of high pressure and intense heat to mold you into something truly spectacular. We have two examples of how people age at the top of our presidential tickets right now: Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I read a story the other day about Donald Trump, and it was about a disabled veteran that he met as part of a White House event. The young man had been severely wounded on a tour in Afghanistan, and he sang "God Bless America" to the crowd. Afterwards, Trump went up to General Mark Milley and said, "Why do you bring people like that here? No one wants to see that, the wounded." Donald Trump said that. Imagine looking at someone who had overcome so much and reducing them to the injuries that they suffered on the battlefield to protect all of us. Then I think about Braden Harrington, the boy that Joe Biden met on the campaign trail in 2020. Braden had a stutter. He shared that with Joe Biden. Biden didn't mock him. He didn't suggest that no one wants to see that. No, he invited him backstage after a town hall. He showed him how he marks up his speeches before he delivers them, so that he knows where to pause so that he can overcome his own stutter. He talked to Braden about reading poetry by Yeats to help practice his pronunciation. Joe Biden showed him kindness and offered him hope. It's not just that Donald Trump doesn't have Joe Biden's character. It's that as he grew old, he had a chance to take all of his life experiences and use them to become someone empathetic, courageous, and kind. And instead, he chose to be cruel, cowardly, and small. It's not the number of years a candidate has lived that matters to me. It's what those years have shaped them into. Joe Biden made age his friend. He's used every one of his years, many of them incredibly hard, losing his wife and daughter in an automobile accident, losing his son to cancer, to become a gem of a human being. We should not take his character for granted, fellow Democrats. I know you're tired of elections where everything is on the line, and I wish I could say that it was going to change sometime soon, but this is a mission ready-made for Wisconsin Democrats. You have had to hold on to hope for so many years. You've had to be persistent through so many trials, and you are winning more battles than you are losing. And I implore you from all of us, I implore you to continue to show the rest of the country how it's done. The Ewoks took down the empire. You've done it before. Make sure you go out and do it again. Thank you, Wisconsin Democrats.